Welcome students to the online NPTEL course Contemporary Architecture and Design. In the previous class we started discussing the Prairie School of Architecture style and how it evolved after this, the Chicago World Fair, and because it's the style of Chicago World Fair was not the style they can relate with the USA. So Prairie School of Architecture style was evolved from the prairie land of in USA, and the inspiration of visual style was the prairie land. Now if we look at, they have also the Prairie School of Architecture style has some connection with the Chicago School of Architecture style, and before that in Chicago City Beautiful movement, so here is the Chicago style and the Prairie style. There's some similarities, but then there was a little bit of dissimilarities as well, and the main precursor of the Prairie School was it started in the from the this movement of World Symposium of this Chicago Fair, which happened in the Chicago World Fair, and the style of White City, which we were discussing, which evolved from 200 temporary buildings. They have created the World City. The architectural style was Classical Revival and the Neoclassical style, and the USA architects, they thought this kind of architecture style was not does not represent their own stylistic features. So all of this architecture style, if you look at, this is the European neoclassical style, and they wanted to find out their own inspiration and own style. There was a requirement to create their own style of architecture. For that they went towards their own native land, which is the prairie land, and that's how they have created their own style. So this got criticized. The Columbian Exposition which happened in Chicago got criticized, and because of the style of Columbian Exposition there was a different opposite style which they wanted, and America did not they thought that America should not adopt, and they required a new style of architecture style, which where the inspiration was America's vast treeless prairie land. So that was an American style, and which was opposing the European the emphasis of the neoclassical European style, which was there in the White City of the Columbian Exposition. So here in the Prairie School of Architecture style, as we were discussing in the previous class, there was a horizontal line was main, and the color palette evolved from the prairie flatland. We have seen the prairie flatlands color, which is brown, and then the brick was used to create the color tone, and also there was a lot of asymmetry in the building. The building's outer side form was asymmetric, which was not there in the Chicago school, but definitely Bauhaus adopted that. So the functional attribute of the Bauhaus was also definitely there in the Prairie School of Architecture style. It evolved from function, but also the form was very important for them, and they have taken inspiration from the form as this kind of prairie land, and this kind of horizontality and the linear features we will see. Now in architectural style, as we were discussing, that it has a low pitched roof, which kind of connects the traditional architecture style of the traditional building, which was also present in USA, not only in Europe. And they have the deep overhang, which is cantilever, which creates the horizontality, and the windows, the long rows of window, which creates the void. And that is how they have when this kind of overhang will be juxtaposed by very fragile glass, then the horizontality will increase, because there is a rhythm of solid and void in the horizontal lines. So it creates more horizontal pattern and gives a more the building will look more horizontal, though it is in the same kind of building. If we give more horizontal line and treat it like this versus more vertical lines, this building will look more horizontal, and this building will look least horizontal in nature. And the native materials were used, and the woodwork we will see, and then the brick work was there, but it was never painted to show the natural beauty of the texture of the and the material. And also we have seen some visual connection with the art and craft movement, and how this kind of similar pitched roof was also there, and they have retained. So this does not directly come from art and craft movement, this comes from the traditional architecture style where pitched roof was there. Art and craft movement retained that style, and the prairie style also retained that style, though they have changed the shape and form of the pitched roof, and this becomes more horizontal in nature, and we'll not see the similar kind of proportion here, but the proportion will be changed because they wanted horizontality in the visual style. But and also through the lines, this white bead which is passing throughout the building will also create, here in this case this is black, will create the horizontality of the building. Now also we have seen the similarities with the Chicago style, because some of the architects of Chicago style was also there in the Prairie School of Architecture style. Now these are some of the examples of Prairie School of Architecture style, which is the main architect was Frank Lloyd Wright and Henry Sullivan. There are other architects as well, but we'll see a lot of work of Frank Lloyd Wright and Henry Sullivan. Here today we'll discuss some of the buildings of Frank Lloyd Wright, who was also a pioneering architect of Prairie School and organic, and Frank Lloyd Wright's work also percolates into the different modernist movement. He worked from his work was in a different style of modernist movement. As he grew and your work style changed, and he worked in many different styles throughout his life. So this is one of his building in Oak Park, which is Willits House, which is you can see the time frame, which is on the just before modern. It's almost modernist first phase started. So here the Frank Lloyd Wright's building, if you look at, so this is in Prairie style. So a lot of horizontal lines are there. If we look at the prairie color tone is there, the traditional pitched roof is maintained but got elongated, and then in the similar kind of row of void through windows will be there in, and then the solid and void of the building will be achieved like this. Here if you look at the plan, Frank Lloyd Wright's design has some kind of visual vocabulary, which is, again, if we start discussing Frank Lloyd Wright, it will be long discussion, because his work is highly discussed, and he was one of the pioneering architect of modernist movement. But if you just clearly if you look at in a very from outside and very overall look and feel of the building, so you will see a core, and then if you look at this kind of treatment which goes in the 45-degree angle and will come and jut out from this his plan, and more or less this will have a strong horizontality and two different axes, and then it will also be punctuated with these kind of row windows which you are seeing in here in the elevation. And if we also look at this kind of form, which is again asymmetric, so this part is different, this part is different, and when they approach, that's also in a but this still has some kind of balance. Some part is here and some part is here, and this is the central axis, but still it creates an occult balance with the play with the solid and void and the massing. So if we look at clearly, as in this course we are looking at more towards the design element, we'll talk about design and the visual design more, and because there are many other planning aspects which is there in the Frank Lloyd Wright's design, which we'll not discuss here. So if we look at the design elements here, this is a window of the Oak Park's house, and we have shown the similar Frank Lloyd Wright's window, which has Theo van Doesburg's who was in Vestigial movement. There's some connection. If you look at why the connection is there, because again this rectangle, it's broken into rectangles and different vertical and horizontal line, which is also there in vestigial movements, architects and designers have followed that. Even in Mondrian's painting, we see breaking the picture frame into horizontal and vertical line. And if we look at the color used is yellow, which is one of the primary color, and again you will see some part of red over here. So here you will see the same kind of window. This is the Frank Lloyd Wright style of window design. Frank Lloyd Wright used to design the outside of the building as well as the inside, and all the furnitures, many of the furnitures, even the interior treatments were designed by the Frank Lloyd Wright himself. So here there is a that is why you can see a link from the outside treatment, the window as well as the skylight, and even in the furniture everything is following a same design vocabulary. If you look at carefully, this light is, if you see the plan, this has a square holder and then pure circle inside, which is the light. So this is again a pure geometry, a globe, and then which is confined by a square. Again it has some similarity with the Bauhaus as well, because these are the parallel movements happening. Bauhaus, Chicago, Prairie and Organic, all these movements are happening parallelly. So they have taken inspiration from each other, but they have also their own stylistic vision and own philosophy, but also some visual elements got repeated in different style. And again, if we look at the purity of material is there, but lot of solid horizontal line is there, and this kind of design will be repeated in his Frank Lloyd Wright's other designs. So this is the vocabulary of Frank Lloyd Wright's window design and treatment of interior. So if you look at this style carefully, you will identify the Frank Lloyd Wright's genre of window design and the interior element in interior design. Now, as I was talking about Theo van Doesburg's window design, who is a Dutch painter and comes from the vestigial movement. Also, you will see the similar works, and again another Theo van Doesburg's window, which we have shown earlier, was broken into the triangle, and then same kind of color palette was used. This is Frank Lloyd Wright's building in Oak Park, but this is another building in which is Robie House, which we will discuss. But same kind of material you will see of a wooden panel and similar kind of design vocabulary you will see, and this is more of a solid and cuboid. So cuboid in isometric, and then this triangles will be there, and yellow color is used within the glass frame. And similar kind of treatment you will also see on the ceiling and the light which is there on the ceiling. Now here, if we look at Frank Lloyd Wright's painting and look at the other furniture design which is there in vestigial movement, so we see some similarities over there, though it's a very different movement, and Frank Lloyd Wright's style of ornamentation was different. But Frank Lloyd Wright's painting talks about the similarity in the color tone and the similarity of circle, which and the use of circle along with line is there in his painting as well. And when he is designing his interior, so we see this circular globe as a light source, and then squares, and which got repeated here as well. So here also we will see this kind of lines and some visual connection with his paintings and the window design. Now this is Robie House, one of the famous building designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. It's designed for Frederick Robie. That's why it's called Robie House. Here also we'll see the similar kind of horizontality with the white bead and the terracotta brickwork creates a horizontal line, and also the asymmetry is there, and this kind of roof which is cantilever is there. And then this roof is not this is a pitch roof. This is also a pitch roof because it's stretched so much as a long huge cantilever to give the horizontality in the design. So this looks like a horizontal member, but this is also a pitch roof, which is also a stylistic feature of Prairie architecture. The pitch roof got stretched in the horizontal direction, and that's why the solid and void in horizontal direction was achieved to create a lot of horizontality in the design. And also from the outside, this building is absolutely asymmetrical, and it evolved from the form, evolved from the function, as the function was arranged and the form evolved around it, and that's why the asymmetry, which asymmetry will also be followed in the later phases of architecture style. And modernism is more about, the high modern style is more about asymmetry and geometric abstraction, which is starting in the previous stages of modern movement through the Frank Lloyd Wright's and other people's work in this movement in the prairie style. So also we'll see a 45-degree triangular break in the plan. So if we look at the plan, this kind of same elements which were there in the previous design of Frank Lloyd Wright, and again the rows of series of window, and in the center this kind of core is also there. If you look at the plan which is there in the earlier building, you will see the same elements. If you look at this element and the elements over here and the core and the series of this glass work, and look at the Robie House plan, you will see the similarity, a series of glass work and similar kind of treatment you will see in his plan. That is how the visual vocabulary of Frank Lloyd Wright style is coming in the form. And here also in this slide you will see the interior, which is again the same style of Frank Lloyd Wright's interior which is followed. This is Robie House interiors, and Oak Park's design was also kind of similar, and series of straight lines which comes from the ceiling also goes in the wall is there, and pure woodwork and similar kind of windows and similar kind of illumination, which is a combination of circle and square, is there. Now we have discussed the plan, and then if we look at, there is another designer. He's also an architect, but most of his work is in graphic design. Owen Jones is there, and if you look at Owen Jones's work, and this is chromolithography, this also has this similar kind of color palette, and it's definitely more ornate, but same kind of color tone and same kind of breaking it into circle and square is there. But Owen Jones, this is his own design, but he also have written a source book. This is his design, but this is not something prairie style or something like that, because this is a grammar of ornament which is written by Owen Jones. He have talked about different, it's a source book of grammar of ornamentation of different style throughout the world. So he have different templates of grammar. So this is taken from Egyptian style. So Egyptian, what will be the source of Egyptian styles ornamentation, he have painted that. It might be from some other styles, maybe Saracenic style, and the different styles were there. So this is a book of grammar of ornament, but Owen Jones's own work, this is his own work, is also has some similar kind of pattern in the, if you look at the window treatment over here, their kind of patterns are quite similar in his work as well. So in the next class we will discuss more with the examples of organic architecture which evolved from prairie architecture style, and mostly with the examples of Frank Lloyd Wright's work. Thank you.